Let's step back a little, take a look inside our true self, get comfortable in the uncomfortable, and let's embrace our reality. Life is tough, but so are you. Welcome to the Choose Your Attitude podcast with Nicholas Strand. Join Nick, author of Loving Someone Who's Dying, as he shares his experiences of life loss to life on the road as a traveling roadie. He and his guests will get into real topics while encouraging you to let go of the past, lift up the present, and fiercely build your better tomorrow. Let's get through this together. Now, here's your host, Nick Strand.
Hey, welcome to the Choose Your Attitude podcast, where we discuss real life stuff, learn to master the only aspects we can control in life, and use it as a tool to make today the best day of your life. Every morning we wake up with a choice to make. What attitude are you going to create your life with today? We chat with people of all walks of life, people sharing their own stories and tips of some of life's most difficult journey. There is no proper way to do this correctly, besides talking about it and walking through the process, no matter how difficult it may be. So let's train the elephant in the room together, but first, a word from our sponsors. Are you looking for some much needed motivation? Maybe a new way to feel inspired? We know that life is tough, but so are you. Finding that perfect shirt you've been dreaming of is a tough journey, but we have you covered. That's why we are here with Choose Your Attitude apparel. Wear it with confidence and remind yourself you're choosing a way to success. It is a constant reminder that you can share with others. Join the Choose Your Attitude community and share an attitude of style that others will want to be a part of. So get yours now at chooseyouratitude.com. Would you like to be a sponsor on the Choose Your Attitude podcast? Reach out to us at podcast@chooseyouratitude.com. Today, my guest is Bryce Smith and Ben Vadez. Ben Vadez is a mental therapist, and Bryce is a good friend of mine. After the horrible events of George Floyd, then the protests, I reached out to Bryce to help try and create a deeper understanding of racism and where, as a white man, I can do better. I was taken back when he confronted me for reaching out, but as I listened and understood, it was clear. In our talks, we felt it was very important to create an episode about this topic. Here's our chat as we discuss and try to break down the construct of racism and our current status. Alrighty, welcome everybody to Choose Your Attitude podcast. I am excited to have Ben Vadez, a substance use disorder professional, and Bryce Smith, a social justice warrior. Welcome to the show, guys. So today we wanted to talk about kind of some of the events going on right now, the social kind of inadequacy of everything combined, from starting with COVID, but more so deeper into the racial infrastructure that just kind of popped up. I want to read one thing real quick to kind of get us started, and then go from there. So I wrote this. It says, "Hate is our defense mechanism to help us retreat back to feeling safe and comfortable because we may not understand something completely. Love takes work, trust, vulnerability, learning, the ability to step outside your comfort zone in order to grow and build. Love is the greater reward here. There is no easy way to build trust without an extreme amount of empathy, compassion, and challenging yourself to learn others' perspective before you feel your own. We forget people who are asking for help are asking because no one has yet to see their struggle, and they themselves have exhausted all their own efforts to find safety. There is no right way to ask, but rather there is accepting the problem and working towards a solution. We are oftentimes too quick to judge people for how they ask for help, an unintentional act of putting yourself before others. When being asked for help, do the work and help. They are asking for help, not you. Put trust out there, put effort out there. We don't always know the answer, but that's okay. if we stop putting up our defense mechanism to retreat to safety and just listen, break down our own walls, and feel uncomfortable, the solution may be easier than the resistance we cause. The power is within. Challenge yourself to find it. You are the solution. You're going to do the work. So here we are doing that work to kind of break things down. I think the first thing I want to talk about is kind of Bryce and I, when all this happened, when George Floyd got killed by the police officer with his knee down, for me as a white man, I was trying to kind of learn a little bit more about my stance as a white person and trying to learn to do better. And Bryce was that person that I reached out to. And one of the big things that Bryce and I kind of came to as we had our probably an hour and a half, I think it was almost 2-hour conversation, is it wasn't until he kind of got on me for, why am I asking a black man how to learn about this? And it wasn't until I was able to connect that to my own experience of, my own grief and my own calls for help and struggling to be able to, ask for that or bring that help in, because every single time you ask, you kind of get pushed away. So with that, I guess what I want to do is I want to talk about all this together. And I think from that, maybe I'll send it over to you, Bryce, of kind of your feelings from everything I've just said. And then also, maybe a quick standpoint that, kind of some of the thoughts going in your head right now.
Yeah, so I guess the first thing I want to say is like, it was a weird experience for me. You weren't the only person that reached out, kind of trying to understand how to process this. And, you know, innately, like my first response was, like I said, the first thing I said to you on the phone was, before I go down this road with you, I want you to know that this isn't my responsibility. I'm willing to do it out of compassion because I care about you, but this is not my responsibility. And I think that this is a really trying time because there's just kind of these levels of struggle that are being exposed. And it's not really as much about one level being uh, worse. It's more about meeting people where they are, and then standing in other people's shoes to experience their pain, and then comparing that to the world that we live in. And I think doing that objectively, it takes a degree of selflessness. Like, you have to step outside of yourself. But I think that objectively doing that is the best way for us to really understand how to process this situation. Because in our own shoes, well, not in our own shoes, but in the shoes of a white man, um, there's a lot of pieces that are missing when we're talking about this pain. There's a lot of things, not only pieces that are missing from real world experience, but pieces that were just simply not taught to you. Um, Essentially, there's a guise that has been painted over reality in America, and not just America, but across the world, because we don't want to do the work. Like you said, we don't want to feel the suffering that comes from exposing ourselves to the realities that are actually present in their entirety outside of us, especially because we have our own pain and we have our own suffering. It feels really quickly like, yes, I get it. Someone else is experiencing pain, but what about me? When am I going to be heard? Especially when you don't feel like you're being heard in your own experience as a white person who's supposedly benefiting from privilege, and this system is built for you, but it doesn't feel like you're benefiting. So it's like, when am I going to be heard? And yeah, it's really about stepping out of yourself, um, and recognizing that it's not about you. Frankly, existing is not about you. You know, um, you interject.
I was going to say, I think kind of touching base of what you were saying there, I think one of the most difficult struggles that I had, and I think that society is having right now, and I think you kind of said it here too, is at the end of the day, we're all animals, and so there's some instinctual pieces, and so what I'm learning as life kind of goes on is that when you don't have the information, all you can do is you can compare, and if you don't have the information to compare, you sometimes have a hard time to believe. And with the way our education system has created, it has made it to where we don't understand those things. And so, for example, one of the big things I learned is or just learned just now is Martin Luther King. We learn about him being this wonderful human being, which he was, but it wasn't that effort that actually is what actually made the changes that he was working for. It was these protests. And so I guess what I'm getting by that is in our extremes of our minds, it's very difficult to request empathy in such a very strong area, because that request itself is such an uncomfortable that you really have to sit inside and do what you can to pull back those reactions so that way you can actually feel. I guess, Ben, is there, do you have something kind of that you're hearing within all that, or
I guess one of the things that I would say is when we're talking about empathy is so very important. It's also very difficult for people who have their defense mechanisms up so high to even allow themselves to even experience what another person's experiencing. And then when people have these differing agendas and it's causing so much conflict, the defenses are elevated and it just creates a bunch of anger. And it's not right. Structurally, it's the structures within society is completely one-sided, and it's manipulated people to just benefit the white population, which is not okay. And there's structural changes that have to be made, and it's being shown. And it's awesome that it's finally being shown to the magnitude that it is, because it needs to happen. It's not fair in society.
Yeah, I think that there's a deeper lesson behind all this that's extends beyond race, because this really is a conversation about pain and a battle between love and power. And there are people who feel that without the power, they're thrown into the abyss, and there's an innate lack of trust in the universe. I experienced this. I didn't have a really stable upbringing. My mom did the best that she could, but it was single mom, 2 kids, and she's working all the time to support us. So I didn't have that type of stability, and that source of reaffirmation to go to. So I had to find from the universe, from my community, a sense of security. And I think that a lot of people don't really have that, even with the stability. They don't have the money. I mean, they have the money and they have the setup, but there's still this lack of feeling like they are secure and like they are significant. And it's, they're tied to the system where they feel stable. So it's maybe that's not very important. And so on the subject of empathy, it's hard to have that empathy when that's not the base that you're coming from. That's never something you need. You don't have to trust the universe to survive. So then asking those people, jump off of that base of power that you're standing on, jump into the abyss and trust that love is out there and that you're going to survive and thrive, not only survive, but thrive, and have more security than you could have, than money could have ever brought you. So I think that there's that's one of the systems that's really broken, and an illusion that's being cast over everyone. But it's also the case that from that position, people with the most power project outward that you want to keep standing on the platform to people who don't have a lot of power, but just more power than someone else. So there's a lot of people who are lower income, underprivileged, that are white, that don't feel as if they're even benefiting from the system of power, but still don't understand why they should jump off into the abyss and trust that they're going to be safe, and that love is out there. So the system is perpetuating itself. Like, the system of power is feeding itself from the top down, because it's not about race, it's about money. Money equals power. So it's just trickling down. So everyone on the surface believes that they need to be at the place of power, which is why it's really important to target people that are on the fence, because those people, at least, who are at the very bottom of the rung of power, are at least like, well, maybe there's something to gain. If I'm at my lowest, then why do I stand to lose from jumping off into the abyss? But yeah, there's a lot of illusion being cast on us that are detrimental to us as a whole, as a society thriving from love, which is what love is there for.
I think yes. One of the big things that I heard in there is that whole comfort and control. It's the word I use is funny, but just that in itself is a comfortable word using to basically replace the uncomfortable feeling. But when this whole thing kind of started for me, as far as choose your attitude with death, and death is very uncomfortable, and a lot of people do not like to discuss that. And like in this right here, this is very uncomfortable, and we like to go into comfortable. And like you said, comfortable is a form of control. If you're in a comfortable state, you're a lot more confident in the control you have over your environment. However, if you are not comfortable, you are not in control. You are not as confident. And so all of a sudden, your barriers start to go up. And especially in this, because one of those things that I, as you were discussing this, is the whole kind of feeling offended. The extreme that I would use is, white people feeling like black community is being racist back to them because it's the white person's issue. Well, it's tough because there's not one person to blame. It's a society. But that is exactly the issue here, is these feelings come up and we have to be able to understand them or acknowledge them because they are uncomfortable. And so what we have to do, especially when we're being kind of told that we're the one responsible for that feeling that we're uncomfortable with, it's very important that we do what we can to hold back the instinct to put the wall up and just react. And I think that was one thing that you and I, when we were talking about this, I had to break through. And I feel bad that I had to have a personal experience to be able to relate it to. But that was one thing that I had to break through, is feeling offended for something that I hadn't done, but being able to come over that and understand from a full, like you said, on the outside, and get inside that uncomfortable feeling to be able to, find that, the understanding. Yeah.
Become comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah. Where we're kind of coming back to that again, where it's, Ben and I did an episode on that of, becoming comfortable in the uncomfortable. One of those things I want to put in there too is, I think this is where it's very difficult too, is when you're uncomfortable, one of the most guaranteed ways to push somebody away or to push somebody back is using hate. And unintentionally, sometimes you do that, not even realizing you're doing that. But I feel like that's where we're at right now because we are so deep into a feeling. So first off, when, the black community comes to the white community in a comfortable spot and says, there's an issue and it's your society that's the issue, and all of a sudden you feel offended. So you become uncomfortable and you get into a reaction. And what's happening is I feel like the white community gets into that reaction of pushing hate back without even taking a pause to really understand. And so again, what's happening is people's personal feelings are deflecting the actual understanding of the situation. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a fire performer, as you know. Something that I realized recently, it's kind of funny. Whenever you're doing something so high stakes like that, you go into a state of flow, which is this place in between action and reaction. So there's no time in the middle, you know. It's just consistent. A good example of this is when you are um, singing and you're cooking or something. You get into a state of flow, and this just means that before you think about it, you are able to do things that defy the laws of time. Essentially, there's no period of thinking. There's not a second.
Kind of like
Um,
autopilot.
exactly, and it's one of our greatest strengths as humans because we can in this time, for example, with fire spinning, I can do I don't know how many tricks in under a second because it's not time does not confine your capacity to move or do when you're in this space, kind of like time travel. But while this is a tool that we can use, it's also a defense mechanism. Whenever you're trying to have a conversation with someone about this and they get on, defensive, often you'll get like a "Ugh," or like an eye roll or some action. And in that brief moment, they are able to deflect and find a fodder, something to get in the way of them actually processing or the thing actually getting through, which is a tool that it stops them from having to get vulnerable. So people will use this flow. They'll go with this flow, and it like just blocks them. It's like a shield. Filters out the ability for them to receive this knowledge that can be healthy. Arguably, that some of it is sublimated in. Some of it gets through, but it's not a conscious choice for them to process this information. And it's unfortunate because vulnerability is our greatest strength. It's like a muscle. It's not immediately super strong, but you have to tear it. You have to expose that part of yourself. You have to hurt. And it's a good hurt because the more times you find yourself being torn by that vulnerability, the stronger you are at being vulnerable. You could put yourself out there with more ease and not be afraid of rejection, but seek it to some extent because it helps you, grow from that point.
I exactly. It's the confidence in feeling uncomfortable or out of or not in control of the situation. And do you have something to say, Ben?
With vulnerability, it is vulnerability is a skill, and it has been manipulated into being seen as a weakness, and that is not okay. And being able to be vulnerable and embrace that vulnerability is how change happens and how people progress and then become receptive to new ideas. It is something that I struggle with regularly with my patients. They're very, very defensive, and particularly defensive that are in the state of high aggression. And with my office is about 2 miles away from CHOP in Seattle, and so there's a lot of we see a lot of the protests that's going on, and my patients, I try and remain very objective because first of all I have to be for my job. But second of all, just to get a clear view of what my patients are struggling with, and a lot of their defense mechanisms are resulting in anger, and it's not necessarily placed at the protests, which is very interesting. But it's causing all of these different types of defensiveness because all of their daily routines is now being challenged. That's how change happens, is we have to challenge the norm, especially when the norm is not a norm that should be accepted or tolerated.
It's just like COVID and the masks. We're so used to that autopilot, and like you said, that autopilot feeling, or that I forget what term you used, but using that when that all of a sudden is threatened or jeopardized, then all of a sudden you're in that vulnerable state, or you're in that uncomfortable. One of the most recent posts I just put is don't get lost in the what, but truly understanding the why is what helps us heal, helps us grow. It preps us for the win. And where that comes from is I've had some friends that I myself have asked for help. And when you ask them for help, they usually go right into, trying to provide, well, this, you got to do this, you got to do that. And when I say that, it's one of those things of like, they themselves fall into how they've always, their exit of that feeling is to be able to jump into sharing their own feeling. When really what's happening is there needs to be understanding of the why are we feeling this way, as opposed to what trying to fix the what all of a sudden. So why are we feeling this way? That's what we need to understand. That's why we need to actually look at, where if it's always the what, we're jumping ahead too quick. We can't even get to the what yet, because we need to understand why we're feeling this way. And that's the area I feel like we always jump over with our instinct. And it's very difficult even within ourselves, because it's, in this circumstance, it's something that, yeah.
I see that. I see what you're saying, but I see it a little differently, because I think that the what is important. I think recognizing what this feeling is important, and then understanding why we're experiencing this feeling. I just think that people don't want to. People aren't patient. People don't want to take the time. It's people are very ego driven. Another back to fire spinning as an example. A lot of people have this sense, like they're like, how long do you do that? Or like with working out, I'm really big in fitness. People are like, how did you get your body like that? As if there is some innate thing that I magically was born able to do that's different than other people. It's not. It's really just a matter of taking the time, being patient. We have to process. We have to develop an understanding. And that is the skill, right? The same with vulnerability. No one is born with an innate sense of how to do these things that are really difficult. People that are really good at them aren't some subhuman or superhuman thing. I'm not a superhuman because I have a good body. I just took time to develop it. And I think that there's this, it's propaganda. The American market sells to you this idea that you don't want to be vulnerable, therefore here are ways that you can defend yourself against being vulnerable ever. Like these cheat codes that can make you get around everything, and you never have to actually suffer and process it. And that's such an illusion, and it's bullshit, because we all have to suffer. And even if you have these defense mechanisms, you're still going to hurt somewhere. There's still going to be cracks in your armor. So taking the armor off and strengthening that which is beneath the armor is our true defense. And then you realize you don't need defenses because you're strong enough. And I think the American people, without realizing, are indoctrinated to feel like we aren't strong enough from the beginning. Therefore, we need these things that make us stronger, as opposed to actually building the things that can actually do that for us.
I think it's on the micro and the macro level. Micro being the subject matter, so it could be racism, it could be sexuality, it could be any of those equalities, even to some of the things for me, which would be death. But I think it even goes to the macro, which is within our communities. I think some of us get so comfortable in our own community, they feel very strong. But if they were ever to walk outside and go to another community that they were not born in, that they are not experienced in, they would remove that. And I think that's a whole nother experience as well. Is not only is it within, but I think it's also an external. And the fact that, we get so comfortable in our home, in our community, that because that's all we've seen, we feel like that's all that is reality. So when we're told there's something different, we have nothing to really go for besides the TV and stuff like that. And so all of a sudden, when somebody from outside our norm comes in, it then it's uncomfortable because it's not we don't have the information to adjust to that.
It's a bubble effect, right? Definitely, I definitely think that's part of what I was saying about being kind of born into this platform makes you feel a sense of power that's not really there, and trusting the universe, trusting the planet, trusting Earth, trusting your country, actually, that there are people, and that's not trusting that everyone is perfect and good, but it's trusting that there are enough people in the world that are good, and in recognizing that there are people that aren't so good, um, and you know fortifying that sense of strength that prepares you for the people that aren't so good. That strength is fed by the people that are, by the people that do lead with love.
I think I completely agree, and I think one of the things that our world has really has unintentionally taught us as well is not to be kind of political in this, but innocent until proven guilty. Our mind should be thinking the same thing, but I feel like society makes you guilty, then have to earn your innocence even within your brain. So we're judging people before they even allowed themselves, before somebody even allows them to give them an explanation. They're judging the book by its cover without even understanding what's really inside. And there's a whole nother perspective into what's actually happening, especially now with with equality being so much more out there and more open. We look at something and society already judges it, and I feel like it should be the other way around. And that's I think some of the problem in some of the walls is people have gotten so easy to judging somebody, and they haven't even done anything yet.
Ben, something you were saying before makes me think of that. Objectivity in your work, it's important that you stay objective. And I think that people aren't taught objectivity or diplomacy, which are some of the strongest tools just for communicating and connecting to people. Just because someone's a Trump supporter does not mean that I can't have a conversation with them. And frankly, I could be in this echo chamber where all I'm hearing is of people that are woke and understand why Trump sucks. Or I could be equip myself with the tools to enter a space outside of my thinking, and like a scientist, allow those things to only fortify my perspective, but without disrespecting their perspective. Because aren't those the people who I'm trying to heal? Like, am I trying to heal people that are already on the same side as me, or do I want to help people that don't see my perspectives understand it? It's a relief to have the perspective that we have. We are grateful that we have this perspective and that we're not in a state of fear, constant fear. That's kind of underlying everything. So that objectivity is like such an important tool. The willingness to listen to someone first and hear them, and let them respond, and let it influence your approach.
Go ahead, Ben.
I think that when we were talking about Nick with the COVID-19 and how we were looking at external things that are happening outside of ourselves, we as a society have been relying way too much on external solutions for internal problems. And so we are relying on all these external cues and validation in order for us to feel internally okay. And so, kind of like what you were saying, Bryce, with money, us having money equals power. Money's also been convoluted into meaning multiple different forms. It's money is love, money is connection, money is fun, money is all of these other types of things. And once that's no longer theirs, people don't know how to function. When we were talking about the why and the what, I do a lot of analogies in my counseling approach, and I treat addiction. And so addiction is a disease. And one of the analogies I use is diabetes. The symptoms of diabetes are people that are blind, they lose a limb. It's like that's the stuff that's visibly seen externally. And instead of actually being like, oh, let's get you a cane to treat the blindness, or let's get you some glasses so it doesn't make other people uncomfortable, we actually have to look at the defect in the organ, which is the pancreas. And that's an internal thing. And so once you address that, the symptoms go away. And so my job as a counselor is really looking internally. And if you're internally okay, external is irrelevant because you're going to be happy. And that's why some of the happiest people I've ever seen in my profession are people that don't have money. They're people that are just extremely happy with having the experiences they have, the love that they surround themselves with, and they are very successful people. And that's the true determinant of success, is being able to be have that connection with other people and have that ability to see different sides instead of how much money you have or what kind of house you can afford.
I think kind of going into that too is with the objective and kind of tying those two together. What I see that is becoming confident in yourself, or not confident in yourself, but comfortable with yourself, and to knowing and challenging yourself to always allow the ability to take what your mind is thinking and allow that substance to come in to kind of prove it, or to be able to not prove it, but to give you a better understanding. So what I mean by that is when you see somebody and you judge them, to be able to, challenge yourself of, okay, well, this is what I'm thinking right now, but is this really what it is? And I would actually then take that over to when Bryce and I had that conversation, is when we had our conversation, there were some frustration we both shared, but I think we both were at an understanding to where we could look outside our own emotion. And if anything, the frustration was more in ourselves of trying to understand. And so in that whole conversation, that 2 hours was less about us being frustrated at each other and more about our internal frustration of trying to be able to interpret because the other person wasn't clearly understanding. And it wasn't a bad, go ahead.
Oh, no, what I was going to say is that is the key. Being able to identify frustration or any other underlying emotion. Anger is a secondary emotion. Anger is really easy to deal with because we know that when we feel angry, this happens. And so when we're in that state, anger is not the emotion we feel. We feel other types of emotions. We feel frustration, we feel depression, we feel sadness, we feel anxiety, we feel all these different kinds of things. And so in your conversation, to be able to identify frustration is actually the most therapeutic thing you could possibly do, because that's the core emotion. And once you can address that emotion, then the frustration can actually be attributed to something and or it'll go away, but then it won't progress into the anger stage. The more you progress that aggressive state, the harder it is to think logically and actually look at things objectively. It becomes really difficult for anybody to see another person's point of view if they're in that type of anger or rage or type of mentality, because at that point, it's almost past the point of return. And then that's where these it starts to escalate, and then people are getting hurt, and all this stuff is happening. And so that identification of that primary emotion is very important.
I think, tying this actually back to blackness is that, and also something that I said earlier, is that as a black man in America, I feel like you kind of have this innate sense of knowing that it's not about you, unless it is. And I think that was one of the most profound things that I kind of came to the conclusion of. I had inherently known about it, but it was recognizing it and what it meant to me that was so healing. Because I had to think like, as a black man, damn it, it's never about me. But that's not a bad thing. Whenever I am in a conversation with someone about something that I feel like I understand, I have to recognize like I'm not having this conversation for me. This isn't for my ego. This can't be for my ego because energetically, I wouldn't do this to serve myself. This doesn't serve me. This is for you. So, and that goes for both parties, right? When you and I were having a conversation, I had just told myself like, it's not. This isn't about me. It is. You know what I'm saying? Subject matter wise, it is, but it's not personally about me. It's about helping you understand. And then I feel like we're on the same tip. And that's why was a lot easier for us to come to some understanding. Because when we get to a moment of frustration and we're feeling passionate, we have to recognize, is this passion self-serving? Is this passion serving my own ego? Or is this passion because I really want you to get it? Because if it's because I really want you to get it, then I can come down a little bit, It's like, it's okay, actually. Like, we're going there. We're not going to just be there all of a sudden. And if you're patient enough to take your time to go there, then just come down a little bit, and we can both check ourselves to do that. And that's what I mean. It's not about you unless it is. Because the conversation is not about you. But if you recognize that you're making it about you, then you have to do the work internally to, and that part is about you. You know what I mean? Like that part is the only part that's about you, but that's you between yourself and you. You know what I mean? It's not externally about you.
I think that for sure, and it connects to that whole kind of asking for help again. Of like, when you ask for help, we often jump ahead and just try to provide the help because that's more comfortable for us. And what really needs to be done, like you said, is the person asking for help needs to be given the opportunity to be able to work through that ask to make sure the question is set. And that's kind of, I think, what's happening now is in the racism and such like that is, and what makes it difficult is, if somebody's asking for help and you don't hear the whole question, and just like we were talked about being objective, and you go right into an answer, well, you're jumping into your comfort zone because you're trying to repel from that uncomfortable to be able to hear the raw emotions. And I think that kind of connects too with one thing I wanted to say too with what Ben was saying is feel okay. It's my disclaimer to also remind people that okay is not emotionless. Okay is actually standing within those emotions and feeling confident in those emotions, and not reaching the level of anger. So when we're having these discussions, understanding, like you said, Bryce, too, of where that level hits of understanding and frustration, trying to work through something to where you just completely shut off and we're not working towards it anymore because those walls are going up because you're entering too deep into a area of vulnerability or frustration. Does that make sense? I think I see a lot of this, and it's really kind of interesting to watch, from the deaths in my family to now COVID, and then, really bringing the racism stuff out, and moving kind of even into kind of equality, how that's kind of been out there with LGBT and those type of LGBT community, and I think it's really prevalent, and that it's kind of goes to the saying, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Where it's like, that's almost exactly what it is on every single time. Is like when you go to feel an emotion, one thing I try to do is question that emotion. Like, okay, wait, is that really what you're feeling? As I've explained sometimes, is the three different minds of, the outer body, inner body, and then the mediator, and trying to understand those and never fully committing to one of them all the time. Yeah.
I think it's really important to be able to identify your emotions. One of the things that I regularly am talking about with my patients is to not react based on an emotion. Emotions are illogical. They stem from a thought process or from a behavior. And the way that we view a situation and our perception results in some sort of an emotion. And so when we're reacting on the emotion, if it's a negative emotion or something that's possibly like anger or something like that, we're not going to get a good result in that moment. So it is important to be able to be like, okay, what am I feeling right now? And kind of to touch on what you were saying, Bryce, like, is this about me or is this about you? Because if it's about you, then I'm not going to take your stuff. If that's a you thing, then that's a you thing. You can live in that, but I'm not going to take that on. It's that whole saying, not my monkey, not my circus. And so it's being able to take on your own stuff. And so if your emotion's your emotion and it's stealing from your thought process and your behavior, then that's something that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. I think something that I kind of want to bring up here, and this is kind of going back to I was saying, being Black and having this sense of frequently feeling like it's not about me, is that there are many communities that can identify with that. As a queer person as well, I feel that relative to the Black community, it's like, trans and queer people, even though we tend to be very marginalized within Black community, we're still Black. So the question is, is it time for me right now? Is it time for me to make this specifically about my queer experience? Or can we focus on something that's going to heal us in a more complete way that's not specific to me? So I guess what I'm saying is that it serves, and that's another conversation in itself, to be quite frank, because I don't think that there's quite a balance that has been struck there. But the greater conversation is, if I am willing to take myself out of this, can my the things that I provide to the solution ultimately still positively impact me? It's kind of the difference between hedonism and responsible hedonism. Like, do I need this right now? Or can I commit to putting energy into something that's going to give me something greater in the future? I feel there will be a time for us to have conversations about everyone's suffering, about ways that everyone is marginalized. I think that time is approaching rapidly, but you can't start. It's this whole, I don't know if you guys saw yesterday, everybody was using that hashtag, all countries matter. How does that feel? You know what I mean? But that's the conversation. It's like, yes, I recognize that there is a greater pain, but we have to deal with, and I recognize there is a pain that is more specific to you, but we have to deal with the pain in chronological order, if you will. If we're just talking about time, if there's pain that's been happening for 500 years, let's fix that first. Let's fix the thing that has obviously negatively impacted our entire society first. And then we can start focusing on the other things. Then we can talk about the conversation about Black trans women and queer Black people, because that's a part of it. Naturally, if we start where it hurts the worst, then we will find ourselves in a progression. I see, we're talking about Blackness now. Well, the next conversation to arise is queerness and transness in the Black community. And then the next conversation to arise is, you know, queerness generally speaking, or maybe it's not. Maybe simultaneously we can talk about disability and age in the Black community and suffering, and then talk about queerness and disability and transness and aging at once. And then we can talk about aging and disability, not for Black people, for people of color generally. And, you know, there is a progression. If we continue having the conversation, we will continue working our way through and we will meet everyone's struggle. But it's about recognizing what has negatively impacted society the most at the grandest scale and work our way through that. You know, and there's something to be said also for people that have who have been practicing this for so long, people who have willingly been quiet and not made it about them for so long. Why don't we get to that now? You know, how about we get to that? How about we give them a chance to speak? How about we give us a chance to matter? And then we will work our way across the spectrum for all of the people that have had to be quiet, at varying capacities of silence.
So, and I want to touch to that silence, because I think one thing that I want to make clear is when you say had to, it's not like they had to in the fact of that, because I know people are saying, well, you can speak up all you want and ask for help. But what happens as a society is when you get stuck in that sense and you keep asking and nobody listens to that help and gives you a chance to work through it, kind of like we were talking about, and it turns into them, all of a sudden you stop asking and you just deal with it. And I think that's one of those things too of dealing with this whole chronological thing as well, is because I also see the with Black Lives Matter, and then all of a sudden they turn it into was it the Blue Lives Matter or whatever, about the police officers, and then when they start to take the system and actually break that down, and all of a sudden the police and their careers are being thrown at us. Well, it's one of those things where that's where I kind of see the what and the why is if everybody's looking at the police officer that put their knee on George, we're not fixing the problem. And so, but that is,
elaborate on that.
I'm trying to get there. So I guess what I'm saying is the what would be a police officer putting their knee on George. The why is we need systematic change. And to make that systematic change means everybody. And so unfortunately, it means, yes, there are police officers that are good police officers, but there has to be systematic change further up the line, which, yes, everybody is going to change, but the change is for the good. And so once again, this is one of those things that I feel like, and maybe this is reaching a little bit deeper into conversation, but like you to focus on the problem, and the
I think I know what you're trying to say. Like, if you let me interject, are you trying to say that you feel that people are focusing on that specific action as opposed to focusing on the greater purpose that allowed that to happen? So people aren't.
Yes. Yes. There's so that would be the feeling. That's the ask. My pain is from this experience. Okay, but now we got to fix that. And to fix that, we have to change the system. But to change the system means that everybody is going to be affected by this. And so what I'm saying is those that don't want to have those feelings, their argument is, well, the police officers have feelings, so we can't change up there. Well, it doesn't matter about that. We have to change further down there. The same thing as racism, when we talk about it as a white man, is just as uncomfortable as it is for a black man. But to get there, we have to beat that down, because if we're always worried about what's on the surface, we're not going to get to the why. We're always going to be stuck on the what. And that's where I'm saying is as a group, you have to feel uncomfortable together and understand that, you know, we are not, we are not individuals. The world is way more than us. And if we get stuck into this bubble effect again and that comfortable, then you get lost in that. So what I'm saying is not taking away the significance or the feelings from, incidents of like George being kneeled on. But what I'm saying is we can't take things that are, for example, like the police officers' careers and such, that and make that a reason to not fix the actual problem. And that's...
Yeah, we have to recognize what's incidental and what is systemic. And I guess I would kind of like rephrase that what I said before. The what first. I think it's more like what, why, and then what again, right? Because first we have to ask ourselves, what is it? And then once we've assessed what we feel like it is, and this is just like the scientific method, once we've assessed our hypothesis, what do we think it is? Then we have to figure out why. Why do we think that? And then once we've figured out why, we can ask ourselves what again? Like, now that we know why, do we still feel like our what was initially correct, or do we need to modify the what?
Exactly. And I think it's definitely a process, but that process everybody's got to be open with. And I think one of those things that I'd even put in there too is, kind of like with the face masks, or even right now is, this whole bubble aspect that, oh, well, I don't have to deal with it, and so it doesn't affect me. But what we don't realize is that we live in a society that it does affect us. You can say you're free all you want and that if you don't wear the mask, it doesn't affect you. But it does, because if you have to go to the hospital when you get sick, that's going to be there. Or, those type of things. Same thing with society. And not understanding the whole system of how it's suppressed those, in the Black community, or those of disability or LGBTQ. And if you don't understand that, and if we all don't do the work, then there's going to be a lot of those people who actually need the help and are not able to ask, because every single time they ask, they get shot down because everybody think, retreating back to that comfortable state. I want to, so NF has a song called If You Want Love, and I love their lyrics because it says, if you want love, you're going to have to go through pain. If you want love, you're going to have to learn how to change. If you want trust, you're going to have to give some away. And I think those lyrics are just huge, especially the last part. If you want trust, you're going to have to give some away. And I think that kind of touches base onto that whole approach of, innocent until proven guilty. That, if you walk into a scenario not trusting someone, they have no room to enter. So how are we as a society going to be able to do any good if we've already turned them off? Much of using information because we don't know rather than actual information. And that's what I think society really needs to work on and open up. And one thing I've really worked on myself is more on how I can change as an individual, how I can actually feel comfortable in that pain, and do that as a way to sacrifice myself for the community. And I feel like if we all were able to get in that sense, we would get further in all these different areas of, equality and acceptance and understanding.
Absolutely.
Well, there's collectively across the just across the country, but just in general, it's very easy to identify problems. It's really difficult to find solutions, particularly viable solutions that benefit all. And I think that needs to be the primary focus, is being able to find solutions. It is a structural change is needed. It's a political change is needed. There's multiple changes that are needed to happen. It does need to happen individually as well. a lot of what we're trying to do, or what's been kind of considered to be the norm, is putting a Band-Aid over an infection. And you don't put a Band-Aid over an infection. You treat the infection, you get antibiotics, and then it heals properly. So that way there's scars, yes, but it doesn't hurt anymore because it healed the way it should. And so our society's adopted this way of just being able to just Band-Aid all of these wounds and then just pretend like it's going to be fine, out of sight, out of mind. And then things like happen with George Floyd, and it's like, no, it hasn't been changed. It hasn't. It's been using Band-Aids to cover this infection. And it has to be changed. It does. It has to heal properly, and it has to structurally be revamped.
I think, like you said, with the infection, is even infections, a Band-Aid is just one spot, but even with an infection is a global change, because you take in antibiotics and the entire body is treated. And I think the exact same thing is within our society, is that we are all an individual cell to an entire body. And if we're all not willing to make those change, walk into that, give people trust, get vulnerable with each other, we're not going to get anywhere.
The tip of the iceberg didn't sink the Titanic. It was the stuff that was beneath the surface that sank that ship. And it's that stuff needs to change. It's you cannot just deal with the stuff that you just see. It has to be the stuff that's beneath the surface. Like, we have to look at all these different kinds of things, and it causes change. Change needs to happen on the individual, the social, the political, the physical, behavioral, emotional. It has to happen all across the board. And it's a huge task, but it's definitely possible. It's just people actually have to be open to it. And that's going to be, in my opinion, needs to be the focus, is getting people open to that idea, versus being defensive about it and then getting comfortable in their own way of life and then choosing that as the right solution and then rebelling any other forms of change. Change happens whether we want it to or not, because life doesn't care if we're alive or dead. It's going to keep going. And so we can either resist change and be miserable about it, or embrace change, grow, and actually live a happier life.
Yeah.
So
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt, but I gotta get out of here. I got a pretty long day ahead of me. But
it was nice to finally meet you, Bryce, by the way.
Absolutely, yes. I love this conversation. We should continue in our group chat and try to find some solutions, right?
Absolutely.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Thank you for listening. To reach out to Nick and the Choose Your Attitude community, find us on social media at Choose Attitude Create Life. Share your attitude with the world with merch guaranteed to encourage at ChooseYourAttitude.com. Be sure to share us with friends, family, and colleagues. And while you're at it, leave us an uplifting review. We'd very much appreciate it. Check back for new episodes. Until next time, choose your attitude, create your life.